Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our February California Brokers Business Accelerator on improving your negotiating skills. Hosted by our San Diego broker, Tom Bullock, but also featuring a panel of all of our California brokers, Omar Hellman, Stephen Rowe, and Jeff Green. Referrals are the gift that keeps on giving here at Allison James. Therefore, we want to reward you for your agent referrals to all of us. For the month of February, for each agent you refer to us, you will receive a pair of Allison James branded socks. You'll still have 2 days to refer an agent and receive these socks. Even if the agent you referred doesn't join us, you'll still receive these. Also, keep an eye out for your emails as there's going to be a new gift coming up for the month of March. To refer an agent to us, please go to Allison James University and click on the Referrals tab. From there, you will find a form that you can fill out with the agent's information. Allison James has an in-house transaction coordinator company, Sharp TC. Our in-house transaction coordinators are licensed, knowledgeable, and experienced. You can have your first transaction done with Sharp TC for just $99. To learn more, please visit the Allison James University dashboard and click on the Transaction Coordinator button. From there, you'll be taken to a page where you can fill out a form to learn more, or you can get your first transaction started right away. For $99, you cannot go wrong. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started with our California Broker Business Accelerator. Remember, if you have any questions during this presentation, you can type them in the chat box on your Zoom control panel. I'll now pass it over to our brokers, starting with Tom. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning. How's everybody today? I'm going to start out today. By the way, Jeff, was that a photograph of your feet with those socks? Impressive. I have to admit, it was impressive. Today we're going to be talking about negotiations. The skill of negotiation is probably our most important skill set to master. And we as agents are negotiating at every turn. When we're dealing with buyers, when we're dealing with sellers. So I just wanted to kind of touch base with all of you and have all of the brokers today kind of chime in as time goes on here to talk about different things, aspects about negotiations, both with buyers and sellers, that they have found to be successful in their careers. I'm going to start out by just kind of going through the initial, what I consider important features of negotiations, and then I'll let the other brokers kind of chime in, and then I'll wrap up at the end. What you want to do is, going into the negotiation process, you want to make sure that you separate your clients, buyers or sellers, from their problems and the problems of the thought of negotiations and making an offer going forward. It's important that, the more you can separate those issues with your client as you're writing an offer or as you're presenting an offer to your seller, the more success you're going to have. You want everybody to be calm, you want to have everybody to be peaceful, and you obviously want to keep the emotions out of the transaction. Keep in mind that this is a business transaction, a real estate transaction. So you do not want to have emotions creeping into it, both in the beginning, during the process of the escrow itself, and particularly at the closing. So having said that, you want the buyers in making an offer to make their own decisions. Now, you as the agent have been through this process a number of times more than your client. So you really want to make sure that as they're making their own decisions, you're not leading them or you're not pushing them, but you're guiding them. So if they come up with some thoughts or some ideas that you think will be a big problem in the course of making that particular offer, you want to make sure you kind of present in a neutral type fashion all the reasons why you believe that particular idea may not be a good one. You need to be prepared at every turn to diffuse the emotion in the process of negotiating. And you can do that by way of educating both your clients, whether it's the buyer or seller, as to what to anticipate. If they know what to anticipate, then they're going to be less likely to get emotional about the process and develop an attitude towards the seller, towards the buyer, and more importantly, towards you. Be respectful of everybody's opinion. The sellers are going to be uptight because they're trying to get what they want. They want to increase their bottom line number. And so you need to be respectful of their opinion and not try to tell them they're wrong. But through the educational process, through your preparation, you should be able to diffuse those type of issues up front and while you're presenting the offer, when you're making the offer, when you're with the buyer. You want to avoid at all costs polarization because that will kill a deal and it'll make the transaction so much more difficult to get through. And so again, you want to keep the emotion out of it. You want to make sure that everybody is keeping their thoughts, their process on the aspect of business, not emotion. Keep the negotiations to a minimum. Do not make it a complicated process. When you're writing the offer, make sure that your offer is going to be as clean as possible. The more items you can keep off the negotiation list, the easier and the more precise the transaction will be. When you start seeing counter offers going up to 3, 4, or more, then it becomes way too complicated. Everybody tends to forget what was agreed to and what wasn't agreed to through all the counter offers. So again, keep that process as simple as possible. And you need to keep frustrations to a minimum. And you can do that again through your preparation. Prepare your buyers that there may or may not be counter offers and that the seller has every right to accept, reject, or counter what the offer is. So if they anticipate that that could be a possibility, then it won't be a shock to them, and their frustration as to what they think is a good offer potentially won't backfire on you as the agent and will hopefully keep them in the game of negotiations. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff. He has a 3-hour presentation here that he'll be discussing with all of you. And Jeff, in my opinion, is the master at creating comfort zone with his clients, whether it's the buyer or seller. In fact, he's been known to put people to sleep for days with his presentation. So with that said, Jeff, I wanted to give you a big build up here. Please take it forward.
Thank you, Tom. And at your age, being put to sleep is a pretty easy situation. I just probably need to sing you a little lullaby and out you go. But yeah, we're going to do a 3-hour presentation in about 5 minutes or less. But thank you for that heartfelt introduction. That warmed the cockles of my heart, or maybe it's indigestion. I don't know. But negotiation is a really critical thing. And as Tom stated clearly, that getting the emotions out of it is really, really important. And to that point, one of the factors that you need to assess with your client is exactly what do they want and what will they walk away for? What will they put the deal together for? What will they not put the deal together for? And I want to draw on a gentleman, I've read a lot of his books, William Ury, U-R-Y, who is an expert in negotiation, and he basically co-founded the Harvard program on negotiation. And he wrote a book that I'm going to be quoting from this morning, which is called the name of the book. One second here is Getting to Yes, and he has put together a substantial amount of wisdom and techniques gathered over the years. But the biggest one that I found in it is the concept of BATNA, B-A-T-N-A. And what that is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So going into your negotiations, you and your client need to know what is the minimum standard for what they want? What is the best alternative to what they're asking for? And I'm going to quote him real quick, real shortly. The purpose of negotiation is to explore whether you can satisfy your interests better through an agreement than you would by pursuing your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Your BATNA, B-A-T-N-A, is your walkaway alternative. So it may be they're making an offer on a house. The house is $500,000. They're only qualified for $475,000. There's another house down the street for $475,000, and it is their best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So they offer $475,000, and then you go back and forth, and there's counters, and the seller comes back at $490,000, and you keep whittling away to get to the price you want, or they walk away and buy that other alternative. If that other alternative is that other house, then they know exactly what their walkaway point is, how much they can afford, how much they will choose to, what's their settling point, what's their standard. If you go into negotiation with your client and you don't know that, that's where the emotions kick in. Oh, I hoped I wanted to get this. I wanted it. No, I don't want that. And the bottom line is you have to clearly sit down and communicate. Okay, if you don't get this house for $475,000, are you going to be okay with buying the one down the street? Or what do we do next? Do we look somewhere else? If they don't get it at $475,000 and they're going back and forth with the other agent, it doesn't come together. You can tell them, look, we discussed this in advance. This is your best solution, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So it may be that they're going to offer $475,000 and they want closing cost credits, and but they're able to afford it without the closing cost credits. Then you have to say, well, is this better than the other alternative? Is this not getting your closing costs better than the other alternative of buying the house down the street that maybe is 200 square feet smaller or some kind of difference in the property? So they need to understand their best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So I strongly recommend the book. I would certainly find it to be a very useful thing. Actually, the book I was quoting from, I read a lot of his books. I got it confused. He's got Getting to Yes. Getting Past No is the name of that book, where he talks about the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, the BATNA. So that's my tip for the day. And I'll give it back to you, Tom, if you're still awake. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. Omar, do you have some helpful hints that you could throw out there?
Thanks, Tom, and I appreciate you guys with the back and forth. This is better than talking about negotiations here on YouTube. Go at it. But I do have some basic tips in your negotiations, especially going into a changing market potentially, where there could be more inventory, either if you're representing the seller or the buyer. And if you put yourself in the position where if you are on the seller side, there's more inventory, that means more competition that you have to deal with in the marketplace. That means you have to do a better job of negotiating. And also, from the buyer's perspective, there could be more inventory and you have more alternatives, and that could help you from the negotiation standpoint. So you have to be really cognizant of that and understand where you're, as Jeff had said, BATNA. That's a great acronym for what are your alternatives in the case that your deal is not working out or going in the direction that you want it to go. I think the most important thing from let's start with the seller standpoint, from a negotiation, I always tell my sellers to not make it an emotional decision. If it's a lowball offer and we know a buyer is going to come in with something that's not close to what they're asking for, don't make it an emotional decision. And always make sure that you look at the entire deal as if it were something that you may not get an offer on later, and maybe obviously start with the counter offer or something of that nature. The negotiation starts when somebody makes the offer. If in this market, maybe some properties are sitting on market for a little bit longer than anticipated, you could see sellers possibly getting frustrated, and if the offers that they potentially want are not up to par, then they could see an offer that comes in lower, and then where do they go from there? Do they negotiate? Do they hold firm? Those are things you have to have conversations with your sellers. And obviously, same with going to a buyer's perspective. Does a buyer feel like they can now get a little bit less on a property they were potentially having to pay for X amount of dollars more, maybe 6 months or a year before? And so negotiations from a buyer's perspective, educating them and helping them understand that is very critical. I think what you guys have both shared with us thus far about how you can hold your ground, but also give and take to a certain amount is critical. I know most people in negotiations feel like there's a middle ground. And if there is a middle ground to be had and both parties are capable to negotiate to that middle ground, I would say that everybody wins. But if you're really looking to negotiate hard for your clients, find the pressure points, find the points that really are important to your clients and focus on those when you're negotiating. If you're trying to put a deal together, find out what's important. If it's a seller, for instance, and they have to move to a different city or a different state, focus on that. Mr. Seller, are we going to sit here and negotiate over $10,000 or $15,000, or do you want to get to where you want to be in the next 30 days? And that's a conversation you should have with your seller and focus on the points that are really important to them. That's pretty much all I have to share. Thank you guys for having me, and hopefully we'll discuss more about it.
Thank you, Omar. I appreciate your input and your expertise. Steve, your turn.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Tremendous information. And I think I want to kind of restate and reemphasize a couple of the points that have already been made. Several of us, I think probably each one of us has mentioned the idea of keeping emotion out of the negotiation. But the reality is we're dealing with human beings. And especially for our clients, for our buyers, for our sellers, there's going to be emotions involved. They're leaving a home, they're buying a home. There's financial pressures, there's time pressures. So there's going to be emotions involved. And one of our roles is to play the buffer, to be the buffer between my client's emotions and the emotions of the client on the other side. And have rational conversations with the agent on the other side. And so I think one of the mistakes that a lot of agents make is they communicate their client's emotion to the other side. My seller was mad that you made such a low offer, or you asked for such a large credit. That upset them, that got them angry. Well, that doesn't help the negotiation. That doesn't accomplish anything except for just gets, brings emotion to the table between the agents as well as the clients. And so I think part of it, in understanding there's going to be emotion involved. Our clients are going to be emotional. But we need to be the ones who are communicating the facts, communicating it, on an even keel, and remembering the goal. If we're in a transaction, the goal is to close that transaction in a win-win. Where both sides, sellers wants to sell the house, the buyers want to buy the house. Let's help figure out a way to get that accomplished where both sides feel, that they've been treated fairly. I would say one of the things that you need to do is make sure that you emphasize the points that everybody's in agreement on, so that the disagreements can stay in perspective. Sometimes we blow, way out of proportion the fact that we may be $10,000 or $20,000 off in price, but when the bottom line is they're in agreement on 98% of the contract. They're in agreement on the length of escrow, the terms, the down payment, the process, the timing for the contingencies, all of those things, we've been able to succeed. So let's focus on, the few areas, but understand that we're much closer together than we are apart in most of those situations. Tom mentioned the idea about not trying to have too much influence. You know, because the more influence we have on the decisions that are being made by our clients, frankly, the more responsibility we have for those. So we need to be, providing options, help them to see, the choices that they have to make and the possible, consequences of those choices. But again, make sure that we understand it's their decision. I think sometimes agents get so caught up in trying to accomplish something that they forget that it's not their deal. They're not the ones buying the home, or they're not the ones selling the home. So, keeping your role in perspective. And remember, you're negotiating as much with your own client as you are on behalf of your client. So first of all, you have to come to an agreement with your client, be able to present their point of view to the other side. So keep, again, that perspective, and seek to accomplish what they're trying to do, reach their goals. So that's what I have today, guys. I appreciate the time to be able to be a part of this.
Great. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate your expertise and your experience and knowledge. Just in wrapping up here, I have somewhat of a laundry list of items that I think are important that you all keep in mind when it comes to negotiation, whether you're negotiating with the buyer as the buyer's rep or the seller as the seller's rep. And I think one of the important ingredients for us to follow and to keep in mind as agents is to stay humble. The last thing you want to do is come across as a know-it-all, as being arrogant, as being a person that's not flexible as an agent. The reason for that is clearly that you don't want to be a roadblock when it comes to negotiations. You want to be a conduit from the seller to the buyer and the buyer to the seller in terms of expressing the thoughts and the ideas and the reasons for the offer or the counter offer that is being represented. Understand your clients, whether you have a buyer, whether you have a seller, understand both sides of the equation. So if you have a buyer, for example, and you're going to go view a property, my suggestion would be when you call the listing agent, try to get as much of the information you can on that seller. Find out why they're selling, where they're headed. Do it in a nice way, in a conversational way. I have found in my experience that listing agents are more than happy to, when you're making the initial contact with them to show property, to schedule that appointment, to share that type of information with you. I have found listing agents to be less likely to share that type of information with you after they know you've seen the property and you're calling them back, and now they sense your client's interested and they're going to make an offer. So they're going to be a little more guarded in the information that they're willing to share. So again, understand the seller. So when you do show that property, as part of your showing presentation, you can talk about the seller to a degree. They're moving out of state, they're moving, they're downgrading, they're upgrading, whatever the case might be. Those are type of information that makes you look good as an agent and helps the buyer come to an understanding as to why the seller might be selling and what the thought process is there. A big mistake with agents is not being prepared. And you need to be prepared so that if you're on the listing side of the equation, for example, and the buyer's agent calls you, give up the information that will help your seller. You don't have to say, well, they're having trouble making payments. They have health issues. They have to move immediately. Those two are obvious information, but there are others too that are less obvious that, you just want to make sure that whatever information you pass on to that buyer's agent will help your seller, not hinder your seller in terms of the negotiations. Not having options, and Omar and Jeff have talked about that. You want to make sure your buyer has options so that if they don't get their number one property, that they feel comfortable in stepping away if negotiations don't go well and can move on from there. And most importantly, do not lose sight of the end result. Your end result is to put the deal together. So don't allow emotions, do not allow any other type of negativity that could get in the way of putting that deal together and getting that buyer into the home of their dreams and getting the home sold for the seller. Obviously be aware of local market conditions. Is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? And, so that depending on the type of market you're dealing in will help you with your offer as well. You want to make sure that before presenting offers to your seller, you want to make sure as a listing agent, that you deliver those offers as soon as possible. You have to be prepared so that the seller's going to have anxiety when they know you're coming to present an offer. It's always best if you can book the appointment to go talk to your seller and do it in such a fashion that they cannot grill you over the phone. You want to make sure that when you book the appointment and present the offer, that you do it in person. You do not want to do it over the phone. You have no reading on the client, what their feelings are, what their facial expressions are. So always make sure you present that offer to your seller in person. I would suggest having, based on that offer, a seller's net sheet, so you can show them right away what that offer does and how that affects their bottom line. Show them activity on the property. What kind of showings have we had? How many showings have we had? That'll tell them a lot. If there have been past offers that have been rejected, compare those rejections to the current offer and how they size up. I would suggest even doing an update on your market evaluation, making sure that the information and the market hasn't changed dramatically since the first time when you did the listing presentation. And again, if you're on the selling side, on the listing side, that the details of the client, the buyer. How qualified are they? What are they like? Do they have young kids? They want to, they love the backyard. They love the family room. Whatever the case might be, make sure that you have some that type of information that you can pass on to the client. I've seen sellers take a lower offer primarily because a young family was making the offer, and they wanted a young family to move into their home because they had raised their family in that home, and they knew the happy times and how important the school district is and the neighborhood is, and the backyard and the home itself. So again, get information on the buyer to pass on to the seller. If any compliments have been made by the buyer regarding the property, pass those type of compliments on to the seller. Again, that just creates a better atmosphere, a more friendly atmosphere for the client and the transaction. And not in every case, but in some cases might make the difference between getting that offer accepted or not. I would, when you're presenting the offer to the seller, talk about their future plans that they've shared. Talk about, now we can get started. You can get started. You can start making more concrete plans and steps and a timetable as to how you want to do that. And then talk about the price. Talk about, through their net sheet, talk about what it means to them and what would be the best possible way for them to move forward with their future. I'm reminded of a story. One of my agents, this is going back quite a ways, quite a time ago, and there was a husband and wife. They were selling their home. Offers came in. They rejected the offers, and the husband passed away before the home was sold. And the wife, one of the comments the wife made to my agent was, I feel so bad because, there were offers there we could have accepted and they would have worked and we could have sold and we could have moved on and had at least a short time in our future retirement. Now the way it worked out, we don't have any. So, again, you want to make sure those future plans are addressed and talked about and taken into consideration. Last but not least, never postpone negotiations. When you have an offer and you're going to make a counter offer, make sure you do it right away. Revisit reasons for buying or for selling. Do the market evaluation, as I mentioned. And keep in mind one thing, keep it simple, stupid. The fewer counter offers, the better. With that, I am completed the negotiations. If anybody has any questions, please let us know. Reach out to your broker regarding this if you have any questions. And Rebecca, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you everyone else. All of our brokers, you all have really great insight, and I'm so excited that you guys were able to all be on here on the panel together. And thank you everyone else for joining us. We don't have any questions, so I will just be hoping that you all have a great rest of your day. And like Tom said, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to your broker anytime. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week.